The morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the Hartford parlor, but Eleanor May Whitfield barely noticed. She sat rigid in the horsehair chair, her hands folded over the slight swell beneath her corset, while her father paced before the fireplace like a caged animal. "You have brought shame upon this family." Thomas Whitfield's voice cut through the silence like a blade. 23 years I've built our name in this town, and you destroy it with your wanton behavior." Eleanor's mother, Margaret, wept quietly into her handkerchief. "How could you, Eleanor, with a married man, no less, the Reverend Blackwood, of all people?" The words hung in the air like smoke from her father's pipe. Eleanor had known this moment would come since she first felt the quickening in her womb 3 months ago. The secret meetings in the church vestry, the stolen moments that felt like salvation, all reduced to this cold morning of judgment. "The child will be sent away," her father declared. "The Sisters of Charity in Albany will handle the matter. As for you," he turned, his gray eyes hard as flint. "You're no longer my daughter. My associate in Santa Fe has arranged a situation. You'll travel west as a mail-order bride." Eleanor's breath caught. "Father, please." "Silence." The word cracked like a whip. "You forfeited your right to plead when you spread your legs for that hypocrite. At least this way, you might salvage some scrap of respectability." Her mother rose, moving toward her, but Thomas caught her arm. "No, Margaret, she made her choice." 3 weeks later, Eleanor stood on the platform of the train station, a single carpetbag at her feet. No one had come to see her off. The weight of her shame pressed down like the humid Connecticut air. But beneath it, something else stirred, perhaps relief. The child she'd carried was gone, taken in the night by the stern-faced nuns who'd spoken only in whispers. She'd held the baby girl for mere minutes before they pried her away. The train wheezed to life, black smoke billowing against the gray sky. Eleanor climbed aboard, her ticket clutched in gloved fingers. Hartford to Chicago, Chicago to Kansas City, Kansas City to Santa Fe. From there, a stagecoach would carry her to her final destination, a frontier town called Cibola Springs, where a man named Cale Tsosi waited for a wife he'd never met. The journey stretched like a fever dream. Each mile westward stripped away another layer of her former life. By Chicago, she'd removed her mourning jewelry. By Kansas City, she'd traded her silk traveling dress for practical cotton. The other passengers grew rougher with each stop, farmers, miners, women with hard faces and calloused hands. On the 5th day, somewhere in the endless grasslands of Kansas, the train stopped for water. Eleanor stepped onto the platform to stretch her legs and found herself staring at the horizon. No trees, no hills, just earth meeting sky in an unbroken line. "First time west, miss?" She turned to find a weathered woman watching her, amusement crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Yes," Eleanor admitted. "It gets wider," the woman said, "and harder. You got the look of someone running from something." Eleanor's hand moved unconsciously to her flat stomach. "Perhaps I am." "Ain't we all?" The woman spat tobacco juice onto the platform. "Word of advice, forget what you're running from. Focus on what you're running to. The frontier don't care about your past, only if you can survive your future." The stagecoach from Santa Fe proved the woman right. For 3 days, Eleanor bounced and jarred along roads that were little more than suggestions in the dust. Her fellow passengers included a whiskey drummer who leered at her over his sample case, 2 Mexican traders who spoke in rapid Spanish, and an army sergeant who slept with one hand on his service revolver. The landscape transformed from grass to scrub, to desert. Red rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The heat during the day was oppressive, but the nights turned bitter cold. Eleanor huddled in her shawl, feeling the vast emptiness press against the thin walls of the coach. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they were stopped by riders, Apache scouts. The sergeant said, though they wore a mix of traditional dress and cavalry cast-offs. They spoke with the driver in a language Eleanor didn't understand, their dark eyes scanning the passengers. When one looked at her, she felt exposed, as if he could see through to her shame. They're checking for weapons headed to the renegades, the sergeant explained. Been trouble in these parts. As the coach rolled on, Eleanor glimpsed an Apache camp in the distance, wickiups arranged like scattered seeds, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing in the dust. Her future husband came from these people. The thought should have frightened her, but after weeks of numbness, she felt only curiosity. Cibola Springs appeared at sunset, a collection of adobe buildings clustered around a well. The town straddled two worlds, Mexican architecture, Anglo merchants, Apache traders, all existing in uneasy proximity. Eleanor descended from the coach on unsteady legs, her dress dusty, her hair escaping its pins. Mrs. Whitfield? She turned, the false name still foreign on her tongue. She'd insisted on keeping her maiden name, a small rebellion her father couldn't prevent from 2,000 miles away. A Mexican man stood before her, hat in hand. Senora, I am Miguel Chavez. Senor Tsosi asked me to watch for you. Eleanor's heart hammered. Is he here? Say he waits. Miguel gestured toward the edge of town. He does not come to town often. The people... He shrugged expressively. Eleanor understood. Even in Connecticut, she'd heard stories of the Indian Wars, the massacres, the hatreds that ran deeper than desert arroyos. She followed Miguel through streets that smelled of horse dung and wood smoke. Faces peered from doorways, white women who whispered behind their hands, Mexican children who stared openly, a drunk who called out something crude that made Miguel quicken his pace. At the town's edge, where buildings gave way to open desert, a lone figure waited beside a painted horse. Eleanor's steps slowed. Cale Tsosi stood over 6 feet, his broad shoulders wrapped in a wool blanket despite the evening warmth. His hair, black as crow feathers, was tied back from a face that might have been carved from the red rocks themselves. But it was his eyes that stopped her, dark, distant, holding depths of sorrow she recognized like looking in a mirror. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-stained dress, her pale skin already burned by the desert sun, the carpet bag that held everything she owned. You are Eleanor? Not a question. Yes. He nodded once, then turned to Miguel, speaking in Spanish. Some coins changed hands. Miguel touched his hat to Eleanor and disappeared back toward town. Cale mounted his horse in one fluid motion, then looked down at her. For a moment, she thought he might simply ride away, leave her standing in the dust. Then he extended his hand. Come. Eleanor had ridden horses in Connecticut, gentle mares on groomed paths. This was different. She sat sideways before him, his arm around her waist, the only thing keeping her from sliding off as the horse picked its way through the gathering darkness. Neither spoke. The stars emerged like scattered salt, more than she'd ever seen. The house appeared suddenly, a low structure of adobe and timber, almost part of the landscape itself. No glass windows, only openings covered with hide. A cooking fire smoldered in a pit outside. Cale dismounted and lifted her down, his hand strong but impersonal. Inside, the house was sparse, a rope bed in one corner, a rough table, shelves holding a few dishes. A rifle stood propped by the door. The floor was packed earth, swept clean. You sleep there. Cale pointed to the bed. I sleep outside. Eleanor set down her carpet bag. Mr. Tsosi. Cale. He moved to the shelves, taking down a clay pot. You are hungry. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor nodded. She watched as he ladled something from the pot, beans and meat, she thought, into a wooden bowl. He handed it to her along with a horn spoon, then took his own portion and sat cross-legged by the door. They ate in silence. The food was simple but filling, flavored with chilies that made her eyes water. Outside, a coyote howled, answered by another. The sound raised goosebumps on her arms. When they finished, Cale took the bowls outside. Eleanor heard water splashing. She opened her carpet bag, pulling out her nightgown, then hesitated. Where could she change? At home, but home was gone. This was home now. This adobe shell with its strange, silent man. Cale returned, glanced at the nightgown in her hands, and immediately turned away. "I go now. Lock the door." He gestured to a wooden bar. "Wolves come sometimes, and men." Then he was gone, leaving Eleanor alone with the guttering lamp and the vast desert night pressing against the walls. She changed quickly, then lay on the rope bed. It creaked beneath her weight, the blanket rough against her skin. Through the hide-covered window, she could see stars and nothing else. No lights from neighboring houses, no church bells to mark the hours. Just emptiness and silence and the occasional yip of coyotes. Eleanor pressed her hands to her belly, remembering the weight that had been there, the flutter of life now given to strangers. Tears came then, hot and silent. She'd traded one exile for another, one shame for perhaps something worse. But she was alive, and somewhere outside, her strange Apache husband kept watch against the dark. It was more than she'd had that morning in her father's parlor, when her world had collapsed into judgment and condemnation. Eleanor closed her eyes and willed herself toward sleep, toward tomorrow, toward whatever this harsh land would make of her. Dawn came early in the desert, painting the adobe walls rose gold. Eleanor woke to the sound of wood being chopped, rhythmic and steady. Through the hide window covering, she glimpsed Cale's silhouette against the brightening sky, his movements economical and precise. She dressed quickly in her simplest cotton dress, pinned her hair, and ventured outside. Cale glanced up from the woodpile, but said nothing, merely gesturing toward the fire pit where a pot of coffee bubbled. Eleanor poured herself a cup in a tin mug, the bitter liquid nothing like the delicate tea she'd known in Hartford. "There is work," Cale said finally, setting aside the axe. He pointed toward a small garden plot where stunted corn and beans struggled in the sandy soil. "Water must be carried from the well. The house needs tending." He paused, studying her soft hands. "You know such work?" I can learn," Eleanor replied, lifting her chin. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. He showed her the well, a stone-lined hole 30 feet deep, and the leather bucket for drawing water. Eleanor's first attempts were clumsy, the bucket heavy, the rope burning her palms, but she persisted, filling the clay olas while Cale watched silently. By noon, her dress was soaked with sweat, her hands blistered. She'd watered the garden, swept the packed earth floor, attempted to make tortillas from the ground corn Cale showed her, producing instead flat, burned discs that even the ranch dogs wouldn't eat. Cale took one, examined it, then tossed it into the fire. "Tomorrow, better," he said, and went back to his fields. Eleanor watched him walk away, this taciturn stranger who was her husband. He moved across the land like he was part of it, checking fence posts, examining the stunted crops, always alert to the horizon. She noticed how he favored his left leg slightly, how his hand never strayed far from the knife at his belt. Inside the house, she discovered more about him through objects: a cavalry saddle, well-maintained but unused, a beaded pouch hanging from a peg, the geometric patterns distinctly Apache, a Bible in Spanish, its pages worn soft, and on a high shelf, partially hidden, a daguerreotype in a cracked leather frame. Eleanor reached for it, then hesitated, but curiosity won. The image showed a younger Cale standing beside an Apache woman, beautiful and proud, holding an infant. The glass was cracked across their faces, as if someone had struck it in anger or grief. "You should not touch that." Eleanor spun, nearly dropping the frame. Cale stood in the doorway, his face carved from stone. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" He crossed the room in 2 strides, took the photograph from her hands, and replaced it on the shelf. For a moment, rage flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "My wife," he said quietly. "My daughter, dead now 3 winters." "How?" The word escaped before Eleanor could stop it. Cale's jaw tightened. "Soldiers came to the winter camp, said we harbored renegades. We had only women and children, old ones. They—" He stopped, turned away. "They made mistakes." Eleanor understood. She'd read the sanitized versions in Eastern newspapers. Skirmishes. Unfortunate incidents. But standing here, seeing the pain etched in every line of Cale's body, she grasped the true weight of those euphemisms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. "You know loss." It wasn't a question. Eleanor's hand moved involuntarily to her stomach. "Yes." They stood in shared silence. Two damaged souls recognizing each other across the divide of culture and circumstance. Then Cale turned and left, returning to his fields and his silence. Days passed in this pattern. Eleanor rose with dawn, worked until her body ached, fell into exhausted sleep each night. Cale remained distant but no longer hostile. He corrected her mistakes without harshness, left small things to ease her work. A pair of leather gloves for her blistered hands, a hat to shield her from the sun. The nearest neighbors, the Beckett family, lived 2 miles east, close enough to see their smoke, too far for casual visits. When Eleanor ventured to town for supplies after 2 weeks, she understood why. "Squawman's woman," she heard whispered in Murdoch's general store. "Living in sin with a savage." Mrs. Murdoch, the shopkeeper's wife, was less subtle. "You're that Eastern girl, aren't you? Come to marry the Apache." She said the last word like spitting out something rotten. "Don't expect decent folk to associate with your kind." Eleanor kept her voice steady. "I need flour, salt, and coffee, please." "Cash only. No credit for Indian lovers." Eleanor paid with the coins Cale had given her, packed her purchases, and left with her head high. But outside, her hands shook as she loaded the mule. She'd expected judgment. Hadn't she lived with it these past months? But the naked hatred surprised her. At the edge of town, a small voice called out, "Senora! Senora Eleanor!" 3 Apache children stood in the shadow of a building, barefoot and curious. The oldest, a girl perhaps 10 years old, stepped forward. "You are Sosie's new woman?" Eleanor nodded. The girl studied her with dark, intelligent eyes. "I am Maria. These are my brothers, Jose and Carlos." She paused. "Sosie is our uncle, not by blood, but by choice. Your parents. Gone to the Jesus road." Maria's matter-of-fact tone didn't match the tragedy of her words. "The sickness took them, but we are not hungry. The mission ladies feed us if we pray to their God." Eleanor knelt to their level. "Would you like to visit? I could make something sweet." The children exchanged glances. "Sosie would allow this. I'll speak with him." That evening, as they ate their simple meal, Eleanor broached the subject. "I met Maria and her brothers today." Cale's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "They are well. Hungry for more than mission bread, I think." He set down his bowl. "The missionaries teach them to forget who they are. Better hungry than lost." "They could visit. I could teach them letters, numbers, useful things." "You would do this?" Genuine surprise colored his voice. "Children are children," Eleanor said simply. "They didn't choose this world any more than—" She trailed off. "Any more than you chose to be here," Cale finished. He was quiet for a long moment. "They may come, but carefully. The town does not like Apache children near white women." The children's visits became a bright spot in Eleanor's weeks. They were eager learners, quick with languages, switching between Apache, Spanish, and English with ease. Maria especially absorbed everything: letters, numbers, the stories Eleanor told of far-off places with trees that turned gold in autumn. One afternoon, as Eleanor helped Jose with his letters, Maria said suddenly, "You had a baby." Eleanor's hand stilled. "Why do you say that?" "The way you hold yourself sometimes. Like my aunt after she lost hers." The girl's perception was unsettling in one so young. "The white god took it?" "In a way," Eleanor said softly. Maria nodded sagely. "The white god takes much." That evening, Eleanor found herself crying by the fire pit, the children's absence making the silence heavier. She didn't hear Cale approach until he spoke. "The girl sees much." Eleanor wiped her eyes. She's had to. Cale sat beside her on the log bench, leaving careful space between them. For the first time, he seemed to be searching for words. My Sarah, my daughter, would be near Jose's age now. His voice was rough. She laughed like water over stones. Always moving, always joyful. Her mother said she would be a medicine woman, that she had the sight. Eleanor listened, afraid to move lest he stop talking. That morning, I was hunting, gone 3 days. I heard the guns from the valley, saw the smoke. By the time I reached camp, he picked up a stick, threw it into the fire. 23 dead. Women, children, elders. My wife fought. I found 3 soldiers' bodies near her, but she was just one against many. And your daughter? Shot running. She was so small, they probably thought she was a dog from distance. Bitterness crept into his voice. The officer said it was unfortunate, as if they had broken a dish. Eleanor reached out instinctively, her hand covering his. He flinched, but didn't pull away. I went to the warpath after, rode with Victorio's band for a season, killing any whites I found. He looked at their joined hands. It brought no peace, only more ghosts. So I came here, to this empty place, to grow food instead of hatred, and took a white wife, Eleanor said quietly. That must seem like betrayal. To some. He turned his hand palm up, studying her pale fingers against his brown skin. I needed help with the land. Miguel said a woman sought a husband. Asked no questions. I thought, he shrugged. I thought it would be simple. A business arrangement. Nothing is simple, Eleanor said. No, he agreed. You are not what I expected. They sat in companionable silence as the fire died to embers. Finally. Cale stood, helped her to her feet. For a moment they stood close, his hands on her elbows, her face tilted up to his. Something shifted in the space between them, not yet affection, but no longer mere tolerance. It grows late, he said. Stepping back? Eleanor nodded, moved toward the house. At the door, she turned. Cale, thank you for telling me. He was already melding with the shadows, but his voice carried back. We are alike, you and I, ghosts trying to remember how to live. That night, Eleanor heard him cry out in his sleep, speaking Apache words that sounded like pleas or prayers. She lay in the darkness, understanding now the weight he carried, the careful distance he maintained. They were both walking wounded, trying to find footing in this harsh land that cared nothing for their grief. But perhaps, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, that was enough common ground to build upon. Perhaps 2 ghosts could teach each other to be flesh and blood again. The fever came on suddenly. Eleanor had spent the morning at the creek, washing clothes in the cold mountain runoff, her skirts soaked to the knees. By afternoon, chills racked her body despite the desert heat. She tried to hide it, continuing her chores with trembling hands. But when she collapsed beside the cook fire, Cale found her. Eleanor, his voice seemed to come from very far away. Strong arms lifted her, carried her into the house. She was vaguely aware of being placed on the rope bed, of blankets being piled atop her shaking form. So cold, she mumbled through chattering teeth. Cale's hand touched her forehead, and she heard him curse softly in Apache. He left, returned with a bucket of water and clean cloths. Through the night, he tended her, cooling her burning skin when the fever spiked, covering her when chills returned. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes believing herself back in Hartford, calling for her mother. Other times she knew where she was, felt Cale's calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he spooned water between her cracked lips. In her delirium, she spoke of things better left buried. The baby, she wept. They wouldn't let me hold her, just took her away, said it was better. But how could it be better? She was mine, mine. Cale said nothing, but his hand found hers in the darkness, anchoring her to the present. On the second night, when the fever peaked, he began to sing, low, rhythmic chants in Apache that seemed to weave through her dreams. She didn't understand the words, but the cadence soothed something deep within. Later, she would wonder if they were healing songs, prayers, or simply lullabies he'd once sung to his daughter. Dawn of the third day brought clarity. Eleanor opened her eyes to find Cale asleep in a chair beside the bed, his hand still loosely holding hers. His face, unguarded in sleep, looked younger, the harsh lines softened. She studied him, the sweep of his lashes, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair had come loose from its binding. He stirred, eyes opening to meet hers. For a moment, neither moved. Then he sat up, releasing her hand, the mask sliding back into place. "The fever has broken." "Yes," her voice was hoarse. "Thank you." He rose, busied himself at the water bucket. "You spoke in your fever." Eleanor's stomach clenched. "What did I say?" "Enough." He brought her water, helped her sit up to drink. "Rest now. I will make broth." But when he turned to leave, Eleanor caught his sleeve. "Cale, what I said about the baby, you need speak no more of it." His voice was gruff. "The past owns too much of us already." That afternoon, while Eleanor dozed, she woke to find something on the pillow beside her, a necklace of carved bone and turquoise beads, strung on sinew. She recognized it as Apache work, probably his wife's. The gesture broke something open in her chest. When Cale returned with soup, she was wearing it. His eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing, simply handed her the bowl. They ate in silence, but it was different now, warmer, like the quiet between old friends. As Eleanor recovered, their relationship shifted subtly. Cale no longer slept only outside, instead spreading his bedroll near the door inside. He began teaching her things. Which plants could heal, how to read weather and the flight of birds, the names of stars in Apache. In return, Eleanor shared what she knew, poetry memorized in girlhood, songs from Hartford socials, stories from books he'd never read. One evening, a sandstorm rose from nowhere, turning day to night. They worked together to secure the house, stuffing cloth under the door, covering the windows. The wind howled like a living thing, driving sand through every tiny gap. "It will pass," Cale said as they huddled in the semi-darkness, a single candle flickering between them. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter. The house groaned under the wind's assault. "Does it frighten you, the storms?" "No. Storms are honest. They come, they rage, they pass. It's the quiet dangers that concern me." He paused. "You've been quiet since the fever. What troubles you?" Eleanor touched the necklace at her throat. "I dream about her, my daughter. Wonder who holds her now. What name they gave her. If she'll grow up hating me for giving her away." "You had no choice. There's always a choice. I could have fought harder, run away with her, found work somewhere." She trailed off, knowing how impossible it would have been. A ruined woman with an infant. No money, no family. "Guilt is a luxury," Cale said quietly. "It changes nothing but poisons everything. My wife, Morning Dove was her name. She would say the same, 'Look forward.' She would tell me, 'The dead need nothing from us but to be remembered with love, not chains.' She sounds wise. She was." In the candlelight, his face softened with memory. "Stubborn, too. Refused 3 other men before accepting me. Said they had eyes like hungry coyotes. But mine were like the deep pools where fish hide." Eleanor smiled despite her melancholy. "And your daughter, wild as her mother, feared nothing. Not horses, not thunder, not even me when I was stern." He actually smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "Once she put a lizard in my boot. When I shouted, she laughed so hard she fell over." They talked through the storm, sharing memories like precious water in the desert. When the wind finally died near dawn, they ventured out to find the world transformed. Sand drifted against walls, the garden half buried, the sky washed clean. "We'll replant," Cale said, surveying the damage. "We will," Eleanor agreed, and felt the truth of that small word. Days took on new rhythm. They worked side by side, rebuilding what the storm destroyed. Eleanor's hands grew calloused but capable. Her skin bronzed under the sun. The soft Hartford girl was disappearing, replaced by something harder but perhaps more real. One afternoon, as they repaired the chicken coop, Eleanor hummed while she worked, an old hymn from childhood. Cale listened, then surprised her by humming along, his voice harmonizing with hers. When she looked at him questioningly, he shrugged. "The mission school. They taught us their songs before they beat us for speaking our own." Eleanor's hand stilled on the wire. "I'm sorry." "For what? You didn't wield the stick." He secured another board. "Though your God and theirs seems fond of punishment." "He's not my God anymore," Eleanor said quietly. "No God I recognize would demand what mine did. Shame and exile for love, stealing babies from their mother's arms." Cale looked at her intently. "Then whose God do you serve now?" Eleanor gazed out at the vast desert, the red rocks like ancient temples. "Perhaps the one who lives in the wind and stone, the one who doesn't demand perfection, just survival." That night, they sat outside watching the stars wheel overhead. Eleanor had made rabbit stew, finally mastering the spices that made Cale nod approval. The fire crackled between them, pushing back the darkness. "I have something for you," Cale said suddenly. He went into the house, returned with a folded cloth. Inside was a dress, simple cotton, but decorated with ribbon work in geometric patterns. "It was Mourning Dove's," he said as Eleanor traced the designs. "Put away these 3 years. But cloth should be worn, not hoarded." Eleanor held it up. "It would fit, perhaps a bit loose." "Are you certain?" "She would like that it was used. She was practical that way." He paused, then added softly, "And I think she would like you. You have her strength." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not strong. I'm here because I had nowhere else to go." "No." Cale moved closer, his hand covering hers where it clutched the dress. "You're here because you chose to live instead of die inside. That is strength." They sat quietly, hands touching, watching the fire die to embers. Finally, Cale spoke again, so low she almost missed it. "I am glad you came." Eleanor turned to face him, in the starlight. His eyes were deep pools indeed. "So am I." He lifted his free hand to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite care. "Eleanor, may I?" "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was tentative, almost clumsy, two people who'd forgotten this particular dance. His lips were chapped from sun and wind, but gentle. Eleanor's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart race to match her own. When they parted, both were trembling. Cale pulled back, uncertainty flooding his features. "I should not have—" "Don't!" Eleanor caught his hand. "Please don't apologize. Not for this." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "It has been long since I felt—" He struggled for words. "Since I allowed myself to feel." "I know." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "We can go slowly. We have time." That night, Cale spread his bedroll beside her bed instead of by the door. They didn't touch, but Eleanor felt his presence like a shield against the dark. When nightmare came, the baby crying, always just out of reach, she woke to find his hand reaching across the space between them, offering silent comfort. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'm here." And for the first time in months, Eleanor believed she might be safe. The morning had begun like any other. Eleanor set out just after dawn to gather mesquite pods from a grove a mile south, leaving Cale to repair the corral fence. The desert was particularly beautiful that day, painted in shades of gold and rust, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. She had filled half her basket when the shadows shifted wrong. A low growl froze her blood. Not one wolf, but 3, lean with hunger, circling with the patience of practiced hunters. Eleanor's hand went to the knife at her belt, knowing it would be little use against 3. "Easy," she whispered, backing slowly toward a large rock. The wolves advanced. Amber eyes fixed on her. The leader, scarred and massive, crept closer. Lips pulled back from yellowed fangs. The crack of a rifle split the air. The leader yelped, twisting away as dirt exploded near its feet. Another shot followed. then a third. The pack scattered, melting back into the scrub as quickly as they'd appeared. Eleanor turned to see Cale on his painted horse, rifle still raised, his face a mask of controlled fear. He was at her side in seconds, sliding from the saddle to pull her against him. Eleanor. Her name was a prayer on his lips. His hands ran over her arms, her face checking for injury. When I saw you gone, the tracks. He pulled her tighter, and she felt him tremble. I'm safe, she managed, though her own legs felt like water. You came, always, he said fiercely. Always I will come. They stood there in the morning sun, hearts gradually slowing, until Cale pulled back enough to cup her face in his hands. You were lost to me once, not again. Before Eleanor could ask what he meant, his mouth found hers. This kiss was nothing like their first tentative touch. This was desperate, claiming, a man pulling someone back from the edge of an abyss. Eleanor responded in kind, her hands fisting in his shirt, tasting life and need and something deeper than desire. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her. Home, he said roughly. Now. The ride was silent but charged. Eleanor acutely aware of his arm around her waist, the solid warmth of his chest against her back. At the house. He helped her down but didn't release her, instead backing her gently against the adobe wall. I would have died, he said quietly. If the wolves had taken you, died inside, where a man can walk and breathe but never live. His thumb traced her lower lip. You've brought me back from that death. Eleanor, do you understand? Yes, she whispered, because she did. They had both been the walking dead, going through motions of life without truly living. Cale, Shh. He kissed her again, softly this time. Come inside. In the dimness of the house, Eleanor felt suddenly shy. They had been married for months now, but this was choosing each other, not just accepting circumstances. Are you certain? Cale asked, reading her hesitation. Instead of answering, Eleanor reached for the buttons of her dress. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes never left his. I've been certain since you sang away my fever. He crossed to her then, stilling her hands with his own. Let me. With infinite care, he helped her undress, pausing to kiss each revealed patch of skin. Eleanor had expected urgency after their encounter with the wolves, but Cale seemed determined to memorize every moment. When she stood in only her shift, he stepped back. Beautiful, he murmured in Apache, then translated at her questioning look, like moonlight on water. Eleanor reached for him then, working at the buttons of his shirt with more confidence. The scars she revealed made her breath catch, a map of violence across his chest and arms, some old, some newer, the wages of survival in a harsh land. From the warpath, he said quietly, and before. She traced a particularly vicious scar along his ribs. Does it hurt? Not now. He caught her hand, pressed it flat against his heart. This hurt worse. Empty space where love lived. But you... He struggled for words in English, finally reverting to Apache, the liquid sounds falling between them like a blessing. Tell me, Eleanor whispered. I said you fill the empty places, like rain in the desert, bringing dead things back to life. This time when they kissed, they held nothing back. Cale lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed they had never shared. The ropes creaked under their combined weight, but held steady, like everything in this harsh land. Built to endure, they made love slowly, learning each other's geography by touch. Eleanor marveled at the contrast, his warrior's hands so gentle, his strength held in such careful check. When he paused, concerned by her sudden tears, she could only shake her head. Joy, she managed. I'd forgotten it could be like this, with joy instead of shame. Understanding darkened his eyes. He kissed away her tears, murmuring endearments in Apache and Spanish, weaving a net of words to catch her falling. Later, they lay entwined, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Eleanor traced lazy patterns on Cale's chest while he played with her unbound hair, now bleached lighter by the desert sun. "Your first husband," Cale said carefully. "He was not kind." Eleanor knew he meant Reverend Blackwood, though husband was the wrong word. "He was hollow, all performance, no truth. He spoke of love from the pulpit but knew only appetite." She turned in Cale's arms to face him. "He said pretty words when he wanted something, then called me Jezebel when consequences came." You say little but mean everything." Cale's arms tightened around her. "Words are easy. Truth lives in actions." "Then you've been telling me the truth for weeks." Eleanor said, "Every small kindness, every patient lesson. I just wasn't sure I was reading it right." "And you?" He tilted her chin up. "What truth have you been telling?" Eleanor considered. "That I choose this. Choose you. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because nowhere else would be home now." They drowsed through the heat of the day, waking to make love again as shadows lengthened. This time was different, urgent, almost desperate, as if they were both trying to make up for lost time, lost chances. That evening, Eleanor wore Morning Dove's dress for the first time. It fit well, the ribbon work catching the firelight as she moved about preparing dinner. Cale watched her with such naked appreciation that she blushed. "My wife," he said, and the words held new weight. After they ate, he produced a small leather pouch from his saddlebag. "I made this while you slept." Inside was a ring carved from some pale stone, polished smooth. "Selenite," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Moonstone, sacred to my people. It must be kept with care. Water dissolves it. Rough handling breaks it. But treated gently, it glows like captured light." Eleanor understood the metaphor. "Like us." "Like us," he agreed. They sat by the fire, Eleanor between Cale's knees. His arms wrapped around her as they watched the stars emerge. She told him about Connecticut autumns, the way maples blazed like fire. He spoke of his childhood, learning to hunt with his grandfather, the old ways before the whites came in numbers. "Do you miss it?" Eleanor asked. "The way things were. A man might as well miss yesterday's rain. It falls, it passes, the earth remains." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But I would not go back now. Then I had not met you." Eleanor turned in his arms. "Even knowing the pain that brought us here? Pain is the price of life," Cale said simply. "Without my losses, I would still be in the mountains with my clan. Without yours, you would be in a fine house, married to some pale banker." He touched her cheek. "Would you choose that?" Eleanor thought of Hartford's manicured gardens, the suffocating propriety, the life mapped out in advance like a funeral plot. "No, though I wish. The child. Yes, the admission still hurt. I think of her every day. Wonder if she's loved, if she's safe. She is both." Cale said firmly, "You would not have given her to cruel people. Trust your choice." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I know you now. You face wolves with a gathering basket. You learn new ways without complaint. You choose love after betrayal." He tilted her face up to his. "This is not a woman who would give her child to anything but safety." That night they slept truly together for the first time, skin to skin, hearts aligned. When Eleanor woke from the familiar nightmare, Cale was there, drawing her back against his chest, murmuring Apache words she was beginning to understand, words for safety, for belonging, for mine. "Teach me," she whispered in the darkness. "Teach me how to say it back." He did, patient with her pronunciation, until she could tell him in his own language that he was hers, that she claimed him as he claimed her. The words felt like power on her tongue, like bridges built across impossible distances. As dawn approached, they made love once more, slow and sweet with a new knowledge. Outside, a meadowlark began its morning song, and Eleanor thought she had never heard anything so beautiful. "No more sleeping apart," Cale said as they lay tangled together. No more careful distance. No more. Eleanor agreed. We've been ghosts long enough. And in the growing light of a new day, two souls who had thought themselves beyond redemption found that perhaps the desert's greatest gift was its indifference to the past. Here, they could write new stories on the blank page of sand and sky. The smoke was visible from a mile away, black and ugly against the evening sky. Eleanor, returning from Maria's lessons at the edge of town, saw it first and knew immediately. That was their land, their home. No! The word tore from her throat as she kicked the mule into a run. She found Cale beating at the flames consuming their barn with a wet blanket, his face streaked with soot and fury. The structure was already half gone, hay and timber feeding hungry flames that leaped toward the house. "Eleanor, the well!" he shouted. "Buckets!" They fought side by side, hauling water, dousing embers that threatened to spread. Eleanor's dress caught fire at the hem. She plunged it into a water bucket without pause, her hands blistered from the hot metal pails. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. When the barn finally collapsed in a shower of sparks, they managed to keep the flames from spreading to the house, but their winter feed was gone, along with the new plow Cale had traded 2 horses for. In the smoke-cleared aftermath, they found the message. Apache lovers burn in hell, painted on a board, propped where they couldn't miss it. "The Watson brothers," Cale said flatly. "I saw them in town yesterday. They were drunk, talking about cleansing the valley." Eleanor sank onto the ground, exhausted. Her hands were raw. Her throat burned from smoke. "Why? We've done nothing to them." "We exist." Cale's voice was bitter as old coffee. "That's enough for their kind." He turned to check the horses, corralled at a distance and spooked but safe. That's when Eleanor saw the blood soaking through his shirt. "Cale, it's nothing." But he swayed as he said it. Eleanor caught him, eased him down. Lifting his shirt revealed a deep gash along his ribs. Not from the fire, but from something sharp. A broken board, perhaps. Or... "They were here," Cale admitted. 3 of them. Wanted to burn the house with us inside. I discouraged them." "You fought 3 men?" Eleanor's hands shook as she pressed her shawl against the wound. "You could have been killed. Better that than let them touch you." His hand covered hers. "Can you stitch it?" Eleanor had mended clothes, not flesh, but she nodded. "I need supplies from town. The doctor won't treat Apache. You know this." She did know. Doctor. Morrison had made his position clear when she'd sought help for one of Maria's brothers. But there was one person who might help. "Stay here," she ordered. "Press hard on the wound. I'll be back." Eleanor rode harder than she ever had, the mule protesting but obeying. Town was dark, except for the saloons. Yellow light and rough laughter spilling into the street. She kept her head down, making for the small adobe house behind the church. Senora Valdez answered her desperate knocking, took one look at Eleanor's smoke-stained face and bloodied hands, and pulled her inside. "What has happened?" "My husband is hurt, badly." "Please, I need needle and thread for suturing, alcohol, bandages." The older Mexican woman studied her. "The Apache man. They hurt him for marrying you." "Yes." Senora Valdez moved quickly, gathering supplies. "I helped the doctor once, before he decided my brown hands contaminated his instruments. Watch carefully." She demonstrated suturing technique on a piece of leather, made Eleanor practice until her stitches were even, pressed a bottle of tequila into her hands for cleaning, added dried herbs. "Yerba mansa for infection. Make tea, have him drink. And Eleanor," she gripped the younger woman's shoulders, "they will come again. Men like that. They taste blood and want more." Eleanor knew she was right, riding back under stars obscured by smoke. She felt the weight of that certainty. They'd cross some invisible line, and there would be no crossing back. She found Cale where she'd left him, though paler, his breathing shallow, working by lamplight. She cleaned the wound with tequila, apologizing when he hissed through clenched teeth. "I've had worse," he managed. "That doesn't help me." Eleanor threaded the needle with steady hands that belied her racing heart. This will hurt. Pain passes. Death is permanent. So, she did. Each stitch careful and small, as Senora Valdez had shown. Cale remained silent, though sweat beaded his forehead. When she finished, Eleanor wrapped the bandages and helped him into the house. You did well, he murmured as she settled him on their bed. Steady hands, brave heart. I'm not brave. Eleanor mixed the herb tea, held it to his lips. I'm terrified. Same thing. He caught her hand. Fear with action is courage. She sat with him through the night, monitoring his breathing, checking for fever. Near dawn, he woke clear-eyed and reached for her. You went to town alone, at night. You needed help. They could have hurt you. The Watson brothers, others who think like them. Then we would both be hurt. Eleanor smoothed his hair back. That's what marriage means, doesn't it? Your pain is mine. My risk is yours. Something shifted in his eyes. My first wife would have said the same. I told her once not to be foolish, that her life mattered more than pride. She laughed and said, What life without you would matter? She was right. Cale pulled her down beside him, careful of his injury. I would kill them all to keep you safe. Every last one who threatens you. I know. Eleanor traced his face in the growing light. But killing them won't change their hearts. And there are too many who think as they do. Then what? I don't know. She pressed closer, mindful of his wound. But we'll face it together. Later that morning, Eleanor ventured out to survey the damage. The barn was completely gone, black bones against red earth. But worse was what she found in the garden. Every plant torn up, the ground salted, months of work destroyed in minutes of hate. She was kneeling in the ruined soil when hoofbeats made her reach for the rifle Cale had taught her to use. But it was Father Francisco from the mission, his brown robe dusty from riding. My child, he said, dismounting heavily. I heard what happened. Eleanor remained wary. The church had been no friend to her, but Francisco's eyes held genuine concern. They brag in the cantinas, he continued. Say they will drive out the Apache and any who lay with them. The sheriff does nothing. Says barn fires happen. No proof of who did it. We know who did it. Knowing and proving are different things. The priest studied the destroyed garden. I came to warn you, and to offer sanctuary. The mission has strong walls. Protection. Cale won't leave his land. Then he may die on it, and you with him. Francisco pulled a letter from his robes. This came to the church. From Connecticut. Your family, perhaps? Eleanor recognized her mother's handwriting and felt her stomach drop. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Eleanor, if this reaches you, your father has died. Heart failure, the doctor said, but I know it was shame that killed him. The child you bore has been placed with a good family in Boston. I am told she thrives. Do not attempt contact. Do not return. You are dead to us. Find what peace you can in your exile. M. Whitfield. Eleanor read it twice, then crumpled it slowly. Dead to them, as if she hadn't known, but seeing it written. Bad news, Francisco asked gently. Old news, confirmation of what I already knew. She looked up at him. Tell me, Father, does your God forgive women like me, or am I damned for loving outside his laws? Francisco sighed. I think God's forgiveness is wider than man's rules, but I am just a priest in a poor mission. What do I know of heaven's mercy? More than my father's God knew. Eleanor stood, brushing dirt from her ruined skirts. Thank you for the warning, but we won't leave. This is our home. Then God go with you, child, both of you. Eleanor found Cale trying to sit up, face gray with effort. You should rest, she scolded. I heard horses. Father Francisco. He brought a letter from... She stopped, unable to say home. From Connecticut. Cale read the truth in her face. Without a word, he opened his arms. Eleanor fell into them, finally letting tears come. She wept for her father, who died hating her. For her mother, choosing propriety over love. For her daughter, growing up calling another woman mother. Now we are both orphans. Cale murmured into her hair. But we have made our own family. A poor, burnt family. Eleanor laughed through tears. The best kind. Tested by fire. He tilted her face up. Your people have cast you out. Mine tolerate but don't embrace you. Where does that leave us? Eleanor thought of the destroyed garden, the threats, the isolation. Then she thought of this man's arms around her, the life they'd built from nothing, the love that had grown in the desert like an impossible flower. Free, she said finally. It leaves us free. That night, Cale insisted on moving despite his injury. They dragged their remaining belongings into the root cellar he'd dug months ago. Cool, hidden, defensible. If the Watson brothers returned, they wouldn't find easy targets. As they lay together in the earthen dark, Eleanor felt Cale's hand move to her belly. Eleanor, these past days, when you were sick in the mornings. She covered his hand with hers. I wasn't going to say anything until I was certain. Until you were healed. But yes, I think so. His breath caught. A child. Are you? She couldn't finish. Happy, frightened, angry at bringing new life into such uncertainty. I am. He switched to Apache, words flowing like water, then back to English. There is no word. Joy and terror and hope and memory all mixed. But mostly, he kissed her deeply. Mostly grateful. For you. For this chance. For life continuing despite everything. Eleanor curled into him. Protective hand over where new life grew. Outside. Coyotes howled and night birds called. Their barn was ash, their garden destroyed. Their neighbors wished them dead or gone, but here in the dark earth, holding each other in the promise of tomorrow, they were complete. Battered but not broken. Tested but not conquered. Whatever comes, Eleanor whispered. We face it together. Together. Cale agreed. And in that word lived all the faith they needed. The raid happened 3 weeks later, but it wasn't their barn that burned. It was the Garrett Ranch 5 miles north. By morning, everyone in the valley knew the story. Apache raiders had stolen horses, killed 2 cowboys. Never mind that the tracks led wrong, that nothing was taken except what a white thief might want. The word Apache was enough. Eleanor heard the news from Maria, who'd run the 5 miles to warn them. They gather in town, the girl gasped, still catching her breath. Many men with guns. They say all Apache must pay. Cale was already reaching for his rifle. How many? 20, maybe more. The Watson brothers lead them. Maria's eyes were wide with fear. They say you planned it. Uncle, that you brought raiders here. Take the children to the mission. Cale told her, Run, don't walk. Tell Father Francisco what comes. After Maria left, Cale turned to Eleanor. You must go too. Take the horse. No. Eleanor was already loading the second rifle. We've had this discussion. Eleanor, you carry our child. Which is why I stay. This child will not grow up with only stories of its father, as I grew up without mine. She met his eyes steadily. We stand together or not at all. They didn't have long to wait. The mob arrived at midday, dust cloud announcing them like a plague. Eleanor counted 18 men. Some she recognized from town, others strangers drawn by the promise of violence. The Watson brothers rode in front, Jacob and Samuel, faces twisted with righteous fury. Sosie, Jacob Watson shouted. Come out and face justice. Cale stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his hands. Eleanor took position at the window, her own weapon ready. What justice? Cale's voice carried clearly. I've been here, working my land. Liar. Samuel spat tobacco juice. Everyone knows you brought those raiders. Probably got your cut of the horses. Where's your proof? Don't need proof for Apache crimes. Someone shouted from the back. Just rope. The mob surged forward, stopped only by Cale levering his rifle. First man on my property dies. Second man, too. How many of you want to be third? There's one of you. 18 of us. Jacob sneered. 2, Eleanor called from the window, letting them see her rifle barrel. And I shoot better than most of you drink." A few men shifted uneasily. A woman with a gun defending her home was harder to lynch than a lone Apache. "Mrs. Whitfield." Jacob's voice turned oily. "No one wants to hurt you. Just step aside. Let us handle this Apache business. His name is Sosi. He's my husband and the father of my child." Eleanor made sure her voice carried. "You want him. You go through me." "Race traitor," someone yelled. "Apache whore." Eleanor recognized the voice. Tom Morrison, the doctor's son. "Better that than a coward who needs 17 friends to feel brave," she shot back. The standoff stretched. Tension thick as summer dust. Then hoofbeats announced new arrivals. Eleanor's heart sank seeing Sheriff Coleman, likely here to help the mob. But behind him rode Father Francisco and, surprisingly, Judge Solomon Carter from the county seat. "What's this about?" The judge's voice cut through the muttering. He was a small man, but his presence commanded attention. "Apache raid. Judge," Jacob Watson said quickly. "This one's behind it. We're serving justice. Mob justice, you mean?" Judge Carter dismounted slowly. "Last I checked, this was still a territory under law. You have evidence against Mr. Sosi. He's Apache. Not evidence. Sheriff, have you investigated?" Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the tracks did head this direction, before turning east toward Mexico." Father Francisco added calmly, "I followed them myself this morning, unless Senor Sosi can be in 2 places at once, working his land and raiding simultaneously. Priests can lie." Samuel Watson snarled. "As can mobs." Judge Carter replied coolly, "Disperse, now. Anyone who trespasses on this property will be arrested." "You taking an Apache's side over white men?" Jacob's hand moved toward his pistol. The judge's own hand shifted to his coat. "I'm taking the law's side. And gentlemen, before you decide to test me, remember I didn't survive 20 years of frontier justice by being slow." The mob wavered. A few men in the back began edging away. "This ain't over." Jacob pointed at Cale. "You can't hide behind laws forever, savage." After they left, Judge Carter approached the porch. "Mr. Sosi, Mrs. Sosi." He tipped his hat to Eleanor. "I apologize for my neighbors. Not all of us have forgotten what civilization means." "Why help us?" Cale asked bluntly. "My daughter died in California, married a Chinese merchant against my wishes. When the mob came for him, no one stood up. She died trying to protect him." The judge's face was carved with old grief. "I was too late then. Not today." After the judge left, Eleanor found herself shaking. Cale pulled her close, hand protective over where their child grew. "It's not over," she whispered. "No, but today we survived. Tomorrow we'll survive again." That night, they made love with desperate tenderness, aware how close they'd come to losing everything. Eleanor traced the new scar on Cale's ribs, now healed to a pink line. "I would have shot them," she confessed in the darkness. "If they touched you, I would have killed as many as I could." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "That terrifies me more than the mob. What this place makes us become to survive. We become what we must." Eleanor thought of the girl she'd been in Hartford, soft and sheltered. That girl was as dead as her father. Is that so wrong? Not wrong, necessary, but... He struggled for words. "I don't want our child born into blood. Growing up as I did, always fighting, always hated." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about your childhood, before the fighting." Cale rarely spoke of those times, but tonight he did. He told her of summer hunts with his uncles, learning to read weather and track, of his grandmother's stories around winter fires, of the girl who became Mourning Dove, how she could make anyone laugh. "We were happy," he said simply. "Before the soldiers, the reservations, the wars. We were just people living as we'd always lived. Our child will know happiness too," Eleanor promised. "Different perhaps, but real. We'll make sure of it." Days passed tensely. Eleanor never went to town alone now, and Cale kept weapons close. They worked to repair what they could. started new plantings, rebuilt carefully. The Watson brothers were seen often in town, drinking and talking, gathering support. A week after the mob, Eleanor woke to find Cale gone, his rifle missing too, heart racing. She dressed quickly, then saw the note. Hunting, back by noon, stay inside. But noon came and went. By late afternoon, Eleanor was frantic. She saddled the horse, rifle across her lap, and rode toward his favorite hunting grounds. She found him 2 miles out, unconscious, blood pooling beneath his head. His horse grazed nearby, reins tangled in brush. Cale! Eleanor flew from the saddle, cradling his head. The wound was ugly, a deep gash along his temple, too straight to be accidental. He stirred at her voice, eyes struggling to focus. Eleanor? I'm here. What happened? Watson brothers jumped me, fought them off, but... He tried to sit up, gasped. My ribs. Eleanor could see the damage, new injuries over barely healed ones. Somehow she got him onto the horse, herself walking alongside, one hand steadying him. The journey home was agony, every step potentially his last. Inside, she cleaned and bandaged, gave him whiskey for pain. The head wound was bad, but the ribs worried her more. Broken again, maybe worse. We need help, she said. No one will come. Senora Valdez won't risk the mob's anger. Not for us. He caught her hand. Eleanor, if I die... You won't. Listen, if I die, take our child and leave. Go back east. To what? To shame and shunning? To raise our mixed-blood child among people who despise it? Eleanor's voice was fierce. No. We live together or die together. No middle ground. That night, Cale burned with fever. Eleanor fought it with cool cloths and herb tea, but by dawn he was delirious. Speaking Apache words she didn't know. Desperate. She did the only thing she could think of, fired 3 shots in the air, the old signal for help needed. It was Maria who came, bringing her grandmother, old Pilar. The ancient Apache woman took one look at Cale and began barking orders in mixed Spanish and Apache. Together they worked, cleaning wounds with something that smelled of pine, packing his ribs with cloth soaked in herb mixture, forcing bitter tea between his lips. He is strong, Pilar said as night fell again. But the spirit wanders. You must call him back. How? You know how. You are his anchor to this world now. Eleanor understood. She sent Maria and Pilar away, then lay carefully beside Cale. She talked, telling him about their child growing within her, about the future they'd planned, about her love that had grown in this harsh land like the impossible desert flowers. When words ran out, she sang, hymns from childhood, songs he taught her, melodies without words that came from her heart. Near dawn, his fever broke. His hand found hers, weak but purposeful. Eleanor, her name was a whisper. You called me back. Always, she promised. Always I will call you back. The next day brought unexpected visitors, 3 Apache men, young and hard-faced. Eleanor met them with rifle ready, but they raised empty hands. We are cousins to Tsosi, one said in accented English. We heard he was hurt. They'd been with Victoria's band, fighting the long defeat in the mountains. Now, hearing family was in danger, they'd come. The men who did this, the speaker continued. They still live? Yes, Eleanor said carefully. But we know where to find them. No. Cale's voice from the doorway. He stood shakily. Eleanor rushing to support him. No more blood. You kill them, the army comes. More die. It solves nothing. They tried to kill you, and failed. Cale faced his cousins. I chose this path, living with her, trying for peace. Don't make my choice meaningless with more war. The youngest cousin spat. You've grown soft, living with whites. Perhaps I've grown tired of counting graves. Cale straightened despite the pain. Go back to the mountains. Live free while you can, but don't bring your war to my door. After they left, Cale collapsed. Eleanor helped him back to bed, heart racing at how close they'd come to disaster. They would have killed the Watsons, she said. Yes, and been hunted down. And the town would blame all Apache, and more would die. He touched her face. This is why we must endure. My heart, to break the circle. Eleanor kissed him gently, tasting medicine and determination. Outside, the desert waited, patient and pitiless. But inside, they had carved out space for something else. Hope, perhaps, or just stubborn refusal to let hatred win. Rest now, she murmured. I'll keep watch. And she did, rifle close, one hand on her growing belly, guarding the fragile life they'd built against all who would destroy it. The decision to leave came with the first frost. Eleanor stood in what remained of their garden, her belly now round with 6 months of pregnancy, staring at the new threats painted on rocks at their boundary. Leave or burn. Apache spawn will not be born here. The Watson brothers had grown bolder since Judge Carter's death from pneumonia last month. We could stay and fight, Cale said from behind her, though his voice held no conviction. With what? You can barely ride since the beating. I can barely bend to tend the garden. Eleanor turned to him, seeing her own exhaustion mirrored in his face. We're not giving up. We're choosing life. That night, they packed what they could carry. The rest they would leave. The house they'd rebuilt. The land Cale had worked for years. Miguel Chavez agreed to watch over it, though they all knew the Watson brothers would likely burn it within days of their departure. Where will you go? Miguel asked. South, Cale said simply. Into the wilderness, away from towns, away from both our peoples. They left before dawn. Eleanor on the gentle mare, Cale leading the pack mule. The sunrise painted the desert in shades of blood and gold, beautiful and foreboding. Eleanor didn't look back. Looking back was for those with something to return to. For 3 days they traveled, following paths Cale knew from his raiding days. They camped cold, afraid fires would draw attention. On the 4th day, they found it, a box canyon with a spring, sheltered by red rocks and screening juniper. Ancient petroglyphs marked the stones, suggesting others had found refuge here across the centuries. Here, Cale said. We stop here. Winter came hard and fast. They built a simple shelter of branches and hides against the canyon wall, barely large enough for 2. Snow blocked the canyon entrance, trapping them but also protecting them from discovery. They survived on the supplies they'd brought. The deer Cale managed to hunt despite his still healing injuries. And the roots Eleanor learned to dig from frozen ground. The nights were worst, endless darkness filled with wind that sounded like voices. They huddled together under every blanket they owned, sharing body heat and stories to push back the cold. Tell me about spring in Connecticut, Cale would say when the wind howled loudest. Eleanor would close her eyes, summoning memories. The dogwood trees bloom first, white and pink like clouds come to earth. Then the tulips my mother planted, red and yellow soldiers all in rows. The air smells green, if green can have a smell. In turn, he told her Apache stories. Coyote the trickster, the hero twins, white-painted woman. Stories his grandmother had told, that her grandmother had told before. Stories their child would need to know. Eleanor's pregnancy progressed despite the hardship. The child moved constantly, as if eager to enter this harsh world. When her pain started during a February blizzard, they both knew the truth. No midwife would come. No help existed beyond these canyon walls. I've delivered horses, Cale said, trying to sound confident. I'm not a horse. Eleanor gasped between contractions. No, you're stronger. For 18 hours she labored. Cale, her only anchor in a sea of pain. He held her, coached her, caught their son as he entered the world with a cry that echoed off ancient stones. He's perfect, Cale whispered, placing the baby on Eleanor's chest. The child was clearly mixed, Cale's dark hair but Eleanor's blue eyes, skin a warm brown between his parents' shades. What should we name him? Eleanor asked, exhausted but euphoric. Samuel, Cale said after a moment. It means heard by God, because surely something heard our prayers in this wilderness. Samuel Tsosi. Eleanor traced the baby's features. Born between worlds, belonging to both. Spring came slowly to the canyon. They'd survived winter but were worn thin, supplies exhausted. Bodies weakened by months of cold and hunger. Samuel thrived on his mother's milk, but Eleanor could see her own bones growing prominent. "We need supplies," she told Cale. "Medicine for Samuel, food for us. We can't last another season like this. The nearest town is 4 days. If they see me, then I'll go." Eleanor jutted her chin. "A woman alone with a baby might find mercy." "It's too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous, but starving is certain." In the end, they went together. Not to Cibola Springs, where they were known, but to a smaller settlement called Dagger Creek. Eleanor entered the general store alone, while Cale waited with Samuel in the hills. The storekeeper, a German immigrant named Holtz, looked at her travel-worn clothes and gaunt face. "You are far from anywhere." "Frau?" "Smith." Eleanor lied smoothly. "My husband and I are homesteading south of here. The winter was difficult." Holtz studied her, taking in the calloused hands, the sun-damaged skin, the steel in her spine. "Yeah, the winter was hard for everyone." He began gathering supplies. "You have money?" Eleanor placed their last coins on the counter, knowing it wasn't enough. Holtz counted, frowned, then swept the coins into his till. "Is enough. And here," he added a small bag of peppermint sticks. "For the little one, when he is older." Outside town, reunited with Cale and Samuel, Eleanor wept from relief, from exhaustion, from the unexpected kindness of a stranger. They returned to their canyon to find it occupied. An old Apache woman sat by their shelter, calmly tending a small fire. "Grandmother," Cale said in Apache, respectful but wary. "This is our place now." "All places belong to the earth," she replied. "But I'm not here for your place. I'm here for you." She was called Sage Woman. She told them, last of her band. Too old for the reservation, too stubborn to die. She'd been watching them since winter, debating whether to approach. "Why now?" Eleanor asked. "Because you need me." Sage Woman looked at Samuel. "This one will walk between worlds. He needs to know both paths. You can teach him white ways. Sozi can teach him some Apache ways. But women's medicine, old knowledge, that takes a grandmother." She stayed. In truth, they needed her desperately. She knew every edible plant, every water source, every sign of weather. More importantly, she helped Eleanor recover from the birth, teaching her teas that restored strength, poultices that healed. Summer brought abundance to their hidden canyon. Under Sage Woman's guidance, they gathered seeds, roots, berries, preserving for the winter ahead. Cale hunted while Eleanor tended Samuel and learned the old woman's skills. Their shelter grew into a proper wickiup, warm and weatherproof. "You could go back now," Sage Woman said one evening as they watched Samuel sleep. "The anger will have cooled. New troubles will have replaced you in their minds." Eleanor looked at Cale. They'd discussed it, late at night when the canyon felt too small. But always they came to the same conclusion. "Back to what?" Eleanor asked. "To being hated separately instead of together. To teaching our son he must choose one world or the other. Here, we're just us," Cale added. "A family. Not symbols or examples or problems to be solved." Sage Woman nodded. "Then you've found wisdom. Most spend lifetimes seeking what you've discovered in this canyon, that home isn't a place but the people who hold your heart." One day in late summer, they had visitors. 3 Apache riders appeared at the canyon mouth, Cale's cousins, the ones who'd offered vengeance. "We heard you lived," the eldest said. "That you had a son." They dismounted carefully, respect for Sage Woman evident in their manner. They'd brought gifts, a cradle board, soft deerskin for clothing, a rifle with ammunition. "The war goes badly," the youngest reported. "Many bands have surrendered. Soon there will be no free Apache except ghosts in the mountains." "And you?" Cale asked. "We ghost a little longer." The eldest looked at Samuel, sleeping in his mother's arms. "This one, he'll never know the old ways fully, but perhaps that's good. The old ways lead to reservation or death. They stayed one night, sharing food and stories. When they left, the youngest pressed something into Eleanor's hand, a small silver cross. "From a Mexican church," he said. "Your God, not ours. But power is power, and this one will need all the protection spirits can give." After they left, Eleanor asked Cale, "Will we ever see them again?" "No," he said simply. "They ride to their ending. They know it, but they choose their path, as we chose ours." As autumn painted the canyon in shades of fire, Eleanor stood at the spring with Samuel on her hip, watching Cale and Sage Woman work together to stretch a deer hide. This wasn't the life she'd imagined as a girl in Connecticut. It wasn't the life Cale had planned when he'd sent for a mail-order bride. But it was theirs, built from loss and pain, but also from choice and love. Their son would grow up between worlds, claimed by neither, free to forge his own path. They would teach him strength and tenderness, Apache resilience and Eastern learning, the old stories and new possibilities. "What are you thinking?" Cale asked, coming to stand beside her. "That I'm happy," Eleanor said, surprised to realize it was true. "Despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, I'm happy." He kissed her temple, then their son's head. "The Apache say happiness is not a destination, but a way of traveling. We travel well together." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, leaning into his strength as the sun set behind red rocks. "We do." That night, as they lay together in their wickiup with Samuel between them and Sage Woman snoring softly by the fire, Eleanor felt the truth of their journey. They'd been cast aside by their own peoples, driven to the margins, forced to create their own world in the wilderness. But in that casting aside, they'd found each other. In the margins, they'd discovered the center. In the wilderness, they'd built a home. And that, Eleanor thought as sleep claimed her, was its own kind of miracle. Spring returned to the canyon with a violence of color: purple lupines, scarlet paintbrush, the impossible yellow of prickly pear blooms. Samuel, now walking on sturdy legs, chased lizards among the rocks while Eleanor watched from the shade of their improved dwelling. They'd built with stone and timber now, creating something more permanent than their original shelter. Sage Woman had passed in the winter, peacefully in her sleep. They'd buried her in the old way, high in the canyon where eagles circled. Her last words to Eleanor, "You are the grandmother now. Teach him well. Mama, look." Samuel held up a blue-tailed lizard, grinning with his father's smile and his mother's eyes. "Careful, little one. All creatures deserve respect." Eleanor helped him release it, watching it scurry away. Her English mixed naturally with Apache words now, creating a language unique to their small family. Cale returned from hunting with news that changed everything. Riders in the valley, soldiers, they're mapping, marking boundaries for the new railroad. Eleanor's heart sank. They'd known this day would come. Progress. They called it the Iron Horse bringing civilization to the wilderness. But civilization meant their canyon would be discovered, their refuge ended. "How long do we have?" she asked. "A season. Maybe 2. Cale set down his rifle, pulled her close. "We need to decide." That night they talked until dawn. Stay and fight for their canyon, likely losing to legal claims and government power. Move deeper into the wilderness, possible, but harder with a growing child. Or we could go back, Eleanor said finally. Not to Cibola Springs. Somewhere new. Live openly. As what? No town will accept us as we are. Then we lie. The words tasted bitter but necessary. I'll be a widow. You'll be Mexican, not Apache. Your mother was Mexican. You could pass. We'll say Samuel's father died, that you're my second husband. Cale was quiet for a long time. To deny my people. To protect our son. Eleanor touched his face. The Apache way is survival. You told me. This is survival. They prepared carefully. Eleanor wrote letters to distant towns, seeking opportunities. A response came from Cedar Ridge, a growing town near the Colorado border. They needed a schoolteacher. The pay was small but included housing. Eleanor practiced her story until it felt true. Mrs. Eleanor Morrison, widow of a cavalry officer killed in action, her son Samuel. Her new husband, Miguel Santos, a rancher from Sonora. Simple, believable, a lie to build a life on. The journey took 2 weeks. They bought new clothes in the first town, burning their deer hide and homespun. Cale cut his hair short, traded his moccasins for boots. The transformation was painful to watch, each change erasing something essential. "You're still you," Eleanor whispered the night before they entered Cedar Ridge. "Clothes don't change your spirit." "Don't they?" He looked at his hands, now gloved to hide the calluses of bow and rifle. "Sometimes I think we shed ourselves like snakes, leaving old skins behind until we forget what we originally were." Cedar Ridge sprawled along a muddy main street, all raw lumber and ambition. The school committee, 3 stern women and a nervous banker, interviewed Eleanor while Cale waited outside with Samuel. "Your qualifications seem adequate, Mrs. Morrison." The lead woman, Mrs. Pemberton, said, "Though we must ask, your husband being Mexican." "My late husband died serving this country," Eleanor said crisply. "I hardly think his sacrifice gives anyone the right to question my choice in finding Samuel a good father." The rebuke worked. They offered her the position, $30 monthly, use of a small house behind the school, and a stern warning about maintaining proper moral standards. Their new home was 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, luxury after the canyon but confining after the wilderness. That first night, Samuel cried for the stars, the space, the sound of coyotes. Cale sat on the narrow porch, staring at mountains he could no longer freely roam. But they adapted, because adaptation meant survival. Eleanor threw herself into teaching, finding joy in young minds eager for knowledge. The children came to love Mrs. Morrison, who told the most wonderful stories and never used the strap. Cale found work at the livery stable, his knowledge of horses invaluable. The owner, a German named Schmidt, cared only that Miguel could gentle the wildest mount. Soon ranchers sought him out specifically. Samuel grew bilingual and clever, moving between worlds with the fluidity of water. At school, he was Samuel Morrison. At home, he learned his true name, his real heritage, whispered like prayers in the darkness. They were careful, so careful. Eleanor pinned her hair properly, attended church socially if not spiritually. Cale spoke Spanish when he spoke at all. Letting people assume taciturnity was a language barrier. They never touched in public, never forgot they were performing. 2 years passed. They saved money, made cautious friendships, created a life that looked real from the outside. Samuel started school, quick and eager as his mother. Eleanor became respected, even liked. Cale was known as the quiet Mexican who could work miracles with horses. Then came the day Eleanor had dreaded. She was teaching when a familiar voice drifted through the window. Jacob Watson, older and meaner, talking to the sheriff. Tracking horse thieves from Cibola Springs, that Apache and his white whore disappeared with prime stock. Eleanor's hand stilled on the blackboard. Through the window, she saw Cale at the livery, saw the moment he recognized the voice. Their eyes met across the dusty street, a lifetime of communication in a glance. That night, they packed quickly. 3 years of careful building, undone by one voice from the past. "We could stay and fight it," Eleanor said without conviction. "It's been years. No proof. Men like Watson don't need proof." Cale hefted their traveling pack. "We've been lucky. Now luck runs out." "I'm tired of running," Samuel said suddenly. 5 years old, but aged by constant vigilance. "Why can't we just be us?" Eleanor knelt before her son, this beautiful boy caught between worlds. "Someday," she promised. "Someday the world will be ready for families like ours. Until then, we protect each other by being careful." They left at dawn, heading north toward Wyoming. In the schoolhouse, Eleanor left a note claiming family emergency. The lie came so easily now. 3 days out, they made camp by a stream. Samuel slept between them, exhausted by travel. Eleanor studied Cale's face in the firelight, seeing new lines, gray threading his temples. How many times can we do this? She asked. How many towns? How many names? As many as it takes. But his voice held weariness to match hers. I'm sorry, she whispered. If you'd married within your people, I'd be deader on the reservation. He pulled her close. Eleanor, my heart, I choose this. Choose you. Choose him, every day. The running is hard, but the alternative is empty. They made love quietly by the dying fire, careful not to wake Samuel, under the vast Wyoming sky. They were themselves again, not the characters they played, but the truth underneath. Cale and Eleanor, Apache and White, parents and partners, exiles who'd found home in each other. Morning brought decisions. North to Montana territory, still wild, still possible. They'd find another town, craft another story. Samuel would attend another school, make friends he'd eventually leave. They'd build another life that could shatter at a familiar voice or suspicious look. Someday, Eleanor told her reflection in the stream, practicing her next character. Someday we'll stop running. But not today. Today they moved on. 3 souls against a world not ready for their kind of love. They'd survive because they must. They'd endure because the alternative was surrender. Look, Samuel called, pointing at an eagle circling overhead. He's following us. Good, Cale said, lifting his son to his shoulders. Eagles bring luck. Eleanor fell into step beside them, one hand on Cale's arm, the other shading her eyes to watch the eagle soar. Perhaps it was an omen, perhaps just a bird. But she chose to believe the former, that something watched over wanderers and outcasts, that love might not conquer all but could at least endure. They walked on, toward mountains and possibility, carrying their home with them like turtles. Behind them, their footprints faded in the wind. Ahead, the trail stretched endless and uncertain, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. The sun climbed higher, painting the landscape gold. In the distance, mountains beckoned with promises of shelter, of new beginnings, of one more chance to live freely. Ready? Cale asked. Always, Eleanor replied. And with Samuel singing a mixing song, half Apache, half hymn, they walked toward tomorrow, unbeaten and unbroken, love their compass in a hostile land. Thank you all for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like Eleanor and Cale connected across cultures. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts. What would you have done in their shoes? How far would you go for love? Until our next story around the campfire, keep the spirit of the frontier alive.